We are now standing at the General Nathanael Greene statue that he's also looking out over onto the Grand Parade. If you come to Valley Forge, this statue is on the property of Washington's Chapel that was created and built in 1903. It's an ongoing existing Episcopal church. So this statue is a little obscure. People can drive right by it. It's on the property of Washington's Chapel. General Greene is also a phenomenal story. If you don't know much about Nathanael Greene, please read about this man. He is a Quaker by birth. He is raised in the Quaker faith. He is from Rhode Island. He was always very interested in military, which was anti-Quaker. He goes into Boston as a young man to go into a bookstore to look for books on military strategy to read. He happens to meet the bookstore owner. They get into a long conversation with each other. They talk about military strategy. They become friends, and they become lifelong friends. And ironically, it's Henry Knox. So when Knox becomes an officer, he says to General Washington, well, I know somebody that might be interested in becoming an officer because he's a friend of mine and he's read a lot of military history, which is Nathanael Greene. Greene becomes a very interesting character. He actually gets ostracized from his family because he joins the American Army, the Continental Army, which he is now ostracized for the rest of his life. He becomes a staff member and then ultimately lifted to become a general under George Washington. And it's Anthony Wayne who literally saved Washington's life after the battles of Long Island when Washington was escaping down into New Jersey. It's Nathanael Greene who is the rear guard so that Washington is able to get out of there and then get down through New Jersey and back into Pennsylvania. Greene is a phenomenal military general. When Washington is here, he has lost his quartermaster general, Thomas Mifflin, a couple of months before because Mifflin quit. He did not like Washington. He thought he was incompetent. So Mifflin quit and went to the Continental Congress to try to get Washington removed. Washington needs a quartermaster general. He says to Nathanael Greene, would you become the quartermaster general? Nathanael Greene says, General, no one writes in history about quartermasters. They write about combat generals. But because of my love and respect for you, I will become the quartermaster. And General Washington said, well, you will have a dual command. You will be quartermaster and you will also be a line commander. And this is Nathanael Greene. He begins to get the men supplied here. He sends men and troops out into Lancaster to get supplies. He sends Anthony Wayne into New Jersey to get supplies. And they begin to bring in food and clothing and blankets to get the men supplied here at the end of January, beginning of February. Greene has a staff of 40 men and officers in the quartermaster department. When the Army leaves here, June 19th of 1778, and begin to march across Pennsylvania into New Jersey to catch the British, Nathanael Greene takes his men, and every day they're out about 10 or 15 miles ahead of Washington's army, setting up the camps, setting up the tents, setting up the campfires, and having the food ready. So when Washington's army gets there that night, all the men have to do is eat, rest, and sleep to get prepared to move the next day. This is the systematic situation that Greene caused and he developed to become the quartermaster general. Later on, when the war moved south, Congress asked General Washington, who do you want to be the commander down there? Washington said Nathanael Greene. They sent Benjamin Franklin, who lost his army. Congress then asked General Washington, who do you want to command the South? Washington, I said Greene. They sent Horatio Gates. And he vacates his army at Camden. Finally, Congress acquiesced to Washington. Nathanael Greene is sent into the South. He works with the militias in the South. He works with Anthony Wayne. He works with the Marquis de Lafayette. And ultimately, Cornwallis is chasing Nathanael Greene all over the South. Finally, Greene quarters him at Yorktown. And Nathanael Greene is the one who really wins the revolution in the South because of his ability to work with the militias, to work with this small army that he has, to work with Daniel Morgan, and he corners Cornwallis at Yorktown, so Washington is able to get this army down to Yorktown with the small French army under General Rochambeau and have Cornwallis surrender Yorktown. Then for the last 2 years, General Greene and Anthony Wayne are going all over the South to clean up the small bands of British soldiers and loyalist militias to secure the South, so the British finally signed the peace in December of 1783. Georgia loved Nathanael Greene. They gave him a plantation. And he lived there for the last few years of his life with his wife and his children, Caddy Greene. And he was out one day looking at his fields, and he got a sunstroke. He came home, collapsed on his bed, and that night he passed away. He's only 44 years old when he passes away. And Georgia loved Nathanael Greene because of what he did. This is, again, one of those unsung heroes, these miraculous stories of how a Quaker with no military background becomes a phenomenal general, takes on the superpower of the day, and helps defeat the British Army for us to secure our independence.